Every day, millions of children around the world go to school hungry, affecting their concentration and ability to learn. I'm Femi Oke.
I'm Malika Bilal. In this episode of The Stream, we speak with people working to ensure students focus on their studies and not their growling stomachs.
At least 368 million children from different economic backgrounds rely on government-offered meals globally. That's according to the World Food Programme. And research suggests both students and the region benefit from the provision of school meals. For many young people, it's the only food they will have all day.
Access to free or reduced price meals can be an obstacle, though. In the United States, lawmakers are working to protect students from lunch shaming, the stigma around a child's inability to afford lunch. Take a look.
Should kids be shamed if they can't pay for their school lunch? Well, it's happening in public school cafeterias across the U.S. One third grader in Alabama was sent home with a stamp that read, "I need lunch money." Other lunch shaming methods include forcing kids to wear designated wristbands and clean cafeteria tables in front of other students. Schools have even gone as far as to throw away a student's hot lunch if he or she doesn't have the money to pay for it. Schools are unable to collect that debt. They're forced to write it off as a loss. In response, schools have introduced some policies that aim to help parents repay lunch bills and others that shame students in hopes of avoiding additional debt.
Trying to improve access and removing stigma attached to school lunch programs is happening around the world. To help us talk about this, in Lima, Peru, Carmen Burbano de Lara is country director at the World Food Programme and lead author of the organisation's global report on school feeding. Swati Narayan is an Indian food rights activist. She's coming to us from London. With us on our set, we have Rodney Taylor. He's the director of food and nutrition services for Fairfax County Public Schools in Springfield, Virginia. And Lucy Melcher. Lucy works at the Share Our Strength organisation in Washington, D.C. She's the Director of Advocacy for Government Relations, leading the No Kid Hungry campaign. Great to have you with us, everybody. Rodney, this is a personal issue for you, because as a kid, what were school lunches like?
School lunch was very important to me. I came from an at-risk home, a family of 7 with working class parents, and didn't always have 3 meals a day, so I looked forward to going to school. I knew I was going to get at least 1 hot meal a day. And there's a certain indignity about being hungry that no child should know, and I know that far more intimately than I'd care to discuss.
We are going to hear from kids and campaigns where we're seeing there's a problem with children. If they sit at school, they sit in class and they feel hungry. Can you explain what that feeling is like?
Oh, absolutely. It's hard to, we call it hangry. In other words, you're hungry and you're angry. And so that's the child that gets sent off to the principal's office, that's fidgeting, that's bullying. That's the child that can't concentrate. You can't be hungry to learn when you're just plain hungry, is the way the First Lady of Virginia puts it, and she's so very right.
Carmen, this isn't an issue just in one part of the world, it's an issue all over the world. Can you give us some sense of the scope of how many children around the world would be in class and, like Rodney's saying, being hungry?
Well, we have studies that tell us that almost every country in the world tries to feed their children in one way or the other because of this issue that hunger and school just don't go well together. So we know, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, that around 368 million children are receiving school meals. But of course, there's a large majority of them that are not, especially in the poorest countries. So just a little note here, we know that, for example, in the richest countries, coverage is almost universal. So children are getting fed in school almost as a norm. But in the poorest countries, coverage is around 18%. So 2 out of 10 children receive free meals in schools. The other 8 have to go to school hungry.
I want to share a story from someone online. This is circulating on what it's like to go to school and be hangry or hungry. This is Senpai who says, in our school, when I didn't have lunch money, I just couldn't eat, period. It was reduced pricing depending on my dad's income, but they didn't understand that he would have good weeks and bad weeks, and annually it was very low, and it was hard to scrape the cents to pay for my lunch. So Lucy, in this scenario in the United States, what ideally would happen when a student doesn't have the money to pay for lunch?
Sure. So I think one of the things that we've seen coming out of the stigma campaigns and things that we've seen out of the lunch shaming, the legislation in New Mexico, and other things we've seen recently is just a reminder of how important these meals are to student success. I mean, as Rodney said, when kids are sitting in class and they're thinking about what they're going to have for lunch or how they're going to pay for lunch, or if they don't eat lunch, when their next meal is going to come, they're certainly not paying attention to the math problem that's on the board or the reading that's in front of them. So ideally, we want to make sure that schools are working with leaders like Rodney and others around the country to make sure that these meals are accessible and available. One of the things that we see is one of the big challenges is with the school breakfast program, where kids, we see only about just over half of all kids who get free or reduced price lunch at school are also receiving a breakfast. That's because the way the program is usually served in the cafeteria before the school day starts isn't convenient for kids. There's a stigma associated with the poor kids being in the cafeteria before the school day starts.
So they're leaving their friends to go to the cafeteria,
Exactly.
and everyone knows that they're leaving their friends to go to the cafeteria.
Or something as simple as a school bus not getting there on time. If the school bus arrives 3 minutes before the bell rings, all those kids on the bus don't have time to go eat. So ideally, in a situation like this, we would see the school serving breakfast after the bell so that students can all eat together, and it really reduces that stigma and makes sure that nobody knows in a classroom who's getting the free meal, whose parents were able to pay for it, because at the end of the day, all that matters is that those kids got that meal.
There's a little video that No Kid Hungry campaign actually produced, just addressing that embarrassment about having to have your school lunch subsidized and your school meal subsidized. Have a look.
Yeah, it's early in the morning, like I'm starving.
Right now, I'm hungry now, but hey, it's life, and I go through it every day.
A lot of teens don't like to be, pitied.
It's hard. I don't like asking for help. I don't like that feeling.
There's a lot of people that think I'll be singled out almost.
When people see us with school breakfast here, people are like, oh, well, what, you ain't eat this morning?
I'm scared, people are gonna think I'm poor or something.
Swati, those were American kids. If we look at the Indian school feeding program, is there stigma attached to that as well? Can you explain how that might affect youngsters?
Well, actually, the Indian program is very different from the one in America. It's absolutely free of cost, and it's open to all children in the school. So, if at all there is stigma, it has to do with societal problems within India, which is that lower caste children sometimes face discrimination, or if the cook is lower caste, then the students boycott and say they won't have the meal. But these are rare and random cases. Mm-hmm. Largely what we have is a fantastic school meal program. It's the largest in the world, 100 million children every day. So today is Monday, and 100 million children would be fed in 1 million schools. And the other thing is, this is really important for our children because 38% of our children are stunted. They're short because of not having enough nutrition under the age of 5. So these meals are extremely important. And it's one of the good things we can say that, yes, India has a fantastic program. But unfortunately, like Rodney said, in the last 2 months, the government has come up with a notification which is moving in the direction of lunch shaming. They're insisting that children have an identity card, and only then will they be given these meals. And we think that this is really not the way to go. And neither are the identity cards going to achieve what they set out to achieve, which is reduce corruption. And the children are certainly not stealing meals. They need these meals. They deserve these meals.
Why do you think the Indian government is going that route? Because you have the largest feeding program in the entire world. Why do you think they're going to a system that might mean that some kids then either can't go to school or go home hungry.
Exactly. So just to give a context, not only is this the largest in the world, it's also really cheap. It just costs $2 billion, which boils down to 10 cents per child per meal. Now the government is looking for corruption within these 10 cents, which really is like looking for a needle in a haystack and burning the entire pile of hay for doing that.
So I understand. I just want to show a look. Lucy and Rodney exchanged a look. When you said 10 cents per child, they went, what? Articulate, exactly. Lucy and Rodney. What's going on here?
Sure, I think Rodney's certainly the person to answer this.
We're awfully wealthy in America then, because we spend $1.20 per meal for lunch, and even that is not enough to feed a child. You're talking about 5 components to a meal. We're performing the impossible, even with $1.20.
5 components to a meal.
Yes.
Unpack this. What are we talking? An apple,
so we're talking about
milk. What?
Milk. You're going to have a fruit, a vegetable, a grain, as well as your protein.
On $1.20.
On $1.20.
So I like that we're talking about this because we got this tweet from Black Physicist who says, maybe we shouldn't call these meals free since they do cost somebody something. Maybe we should call them basic nutritional support for optimal student academic performance. That's a really long name there. But Lucy, picking up on this idea, the money is coming from someplace here in the US. In India, clearly it is, there's more institutional support for it. But where does the money come from? And then when kids aren't able to pay, who's picking up that burden?
Yeah, absolutely. So the meals and the free and reduced price meal programs are largely paid for by the federal government. So the school lunch program, the school breakfast program are mandatory entitlement programs. So they work kind of in the same way that our programs like Medicare and Social Security work, in that as long as you're eligible for these programs, if you meet the income requirements to receive a free or reduced price meal, the school is going to be able to provide one because the federal government is reimbursing the school directly for those meals. With reduced price, it's basically exactly what it sounds like. They're receiving a smaller reimbursement from the federal government and the family's paying a little bit. And then with the paid meal program, the federal government still pays a small amount, but the parents are paying a larger amount. So I think Rodney's probably the best person to answer kind of what it looks like at the school level when the meals aren't paid for by the families.
Yeah, so this shaming that they talk about is we're required to have a policy for how we collect money for meals that aren't paid for, because the meal program must be self-sufficient. Otherwise, you encroach upon the general fund of a school district, which means you have less money for books and for teachers. And so we have to run it in a way where it's self-sufficient, and that means in some cases going after the money from parents who have been determined to be eligible to pay. So in Fairfax County Public Schools, what that means is at the end of the year, we turn that over to a collection agency. We don't hassle kids throughout the year. We provide kids their meals. In some cases, the Parent-Teacher Association or the PTA takes care of it. In other cases, the principal and some auxiliary organization might provide for it, but we're not in the practice of shaming kids.
I mean, Rodney, to be absolutely frank here, there are occasions where primary school kids have gone to school and had their lunch taken away from them because they haven't paid them lunch money.
Yeah.
Swept off the canteen table, given a cheese sandwich instead. People are going to be shocked that this happens in the States. Oh. Yeah, Swati, go ahead.
Yeah, this is really surprising because in India, for 10 cents, what we offer usually is rice, vegetables, and some lentils. And so it's really surprising that, and it's absolutely free of cost. So in the developed world, it's very surprising that children have to pay for these meals. Our trouble is that now the government is insisting on this identity card, which a lot of the children don't have, and that's going to result in the exclusion.
Well, I would agree with you that we shouldn't have to pay for it. We don't charge for books. a kid is going to school to get an education, you're going to make sure they have everything they need. What good is it for a child to go to school and learn well, but we haven't treated the whole body, and so they die at an early age from poor nutrition because we didn't provide for that. So it's my belief that food should be free to all, and I'll explain where the money would come from. So we spend a lot of money on defense, and yet we had generals sign a pact together stating that they felt like the hunger crisis in America was a national defense issue. We're going to spend money on the back end on medical because kids are malnourished early, or kids are going to drop out of school because they aren't eating or they're shamed, and we're going to pay for them to be in prison. It makes no sense. It makes every sense to ensure that every kid has access to food and that we're treating the whole child. It doesn't matter how creative you get with education and providing notebooks and Promethean boards for kids if they can't concentrate to learn.
I want to share a story that one of our community members shared. This is Peter Momo, and he says, I was a beneficiary of school meals through a feeding program administered by the World Food Program. The students in my school were able to overcome hunger. He shows us a picture of what he used to look like when he was in primary school. There he is, and he says their lunch would be boiled corn and split yellow peas plus fortified vegetable oil. Now, he went on to say that sometimes those would be the only meals they had all day, but like a majority of other students, I would have dropped out of school to pick up a job as a gardener or herdsman. The meals instead kept him in school. Carmen, do you want to pick up on that, what the impact of this is if there aren't meals in school, what kids might be doing otherwise?
Sure. There's actually a lot of evidence about the benefits of school feeding on many, many different dimensions, and some of them you've already touched on. One is obviously on the issue of education, and if children are hungry, as we were just discussing, there's just no way that they're going to be able to pay attention. So we have a lot of evidence from studies worldwide that the programs have increased enrollment rates and increased attendance rates. That means children actually staying for longer in school and in classes. And this benefit is higher for girls than for boys. So in areas where we see girls dropping out of school earlier because they want to go, they have to go and care for their siblings or work. The meals provide an incentive for parents to keep them in school and send them to school.
So Carmen, is this basic bribery? You come to school and you get to eat. You come to school, you get to breakfast. Is that how you worked out? This is how to get kids to stay in school. It's to feed them.
Well, it's a way of putting it, but yes.
Yes.
It's an
Good,
incentive.
we should be honest. It's like, come have breakfast, kids, and learn some stuff too. But nutritionally,
also you're getting better quality of food, right?
Yes,
you're getting your micronutrients. If the food is fortified, for example, a lot of the programs have added benefits, added fortificants into the food, then we know from evidence that children increase their nutritional status.
What happens, Carmen, to young brains if they're not fed?
That's not necessary. It's not necessary to increase the food, nutritional quality of the food only through fortification. And probably I could mention something that we're doing in India is trying to encourage several state governments to introduce eggs in the midday meal, which is not only great for proteins for our malnourished children, but is excellent for their health. Unfortunately, and this is a very strange thing that's happened in India, is we are having a lot of pushback from the vegetarian lobby. So we're trying to encourage natural foods, which are, to encourage the poultry industry, the dairy industry, and vegetarians can easily have a banana or milk, while the other children can have eggs. And we did this across several states. Unfortunately, the central government has not funded this yet, but so it's an ongoing struggle.
There's different ways,
Carmen,
as you're mentioning, there's different ways of incorporating this sort of nutritional dimension into the meals. I totally agree with you that it's not just fortification. In other countries, for example, it's increasing the diversity of the meal. So making sure that children don't get processed foods only. There's more access to vegetables, to fruits, to protein, etc. in the meals. Unfortunately, for many countries, this obviously increases the cost of the meal, so there's always that trade-off of how do they make sure that the density of the meal, the nutritional density of the meal, meaning that they get more nutrients per plate of food, is done in a cost-efficient way. But there's definitely different ways in which countries are doing that.
Let's just be frank here, Carmen. If a young brain doesn't get fed well, what happens to it?
Well, if a young brain, children under the age of 5, so even before they get to school, if they're not properly fed, their brains just don't develop the same way that they would develop in a child that has been properly fed, and that means that that's what they're going to have to live for their entire lives. Once you don't provide the proper nutrition at that age, there's a lot that has been lost in that child. Now, when you get to school, there's other needs that school children have, and one of them, for example, is iron, is the availability of iron, of vitamin A, of zinc, and these are all nutrients that children absolutely need to be able to learn. So if they don't have that in their diets, either from home or at school, they're also at a disadvantage in terms of learning and education and later in life.
So that's what happens if a brain isn't fed well. This is what might happen if it is. This is an article referencing a study. Do healthy lunches improve student test scores? So we got a video comment from an economics researcher who says yes. Have a listen to Michael.
Our study found that sourcing school lunches through healthy meal vendors improves student academic performance on standardized tests. What sets our study apart from others is that we looked at the effects not just of providing lunch, but of providing healthier lunches that have higher nutritional content. The significance of our results is that they imply that not only are these lunches better for students, but they actually represent a very cost-effective way to potentially improve student academic performance as well.
So Lucy, you're nodding. I know you touched on this earlier. What did you want to add to that?
I mean, it's a really great point. I would looking forward to reading more about the study. There was a report that came out just a couple of years ago from Deloitte, which is a big consulting firm here in the U.S. and globally, that found that kids who eat school breakfast on a regular basis score up to 17% higher on standardized test scores. So we see, a real correlation there between the kids who are able to get that breakfast on a daily basis at school. We also see, as Rodney mentioned, as others had mentioned, fewer trips to the nurse's office. And we hear anecdotally from teachers all the time and in studies that we've done that find that, when kids get breakfast at school, when they, they pay attention more often, they're raising their hand more, they want to participate in class. And there is, significant research that backs this up as well.
There's a little story I want you to tell, Rodney. In 1 minute. Okay. The student who got lunch and then went to study whatever he went to study. Tell us that story in 1 minute.
This young man I met in the principal's office, and he was crying. And when he stopped, we talked, and I said, "What's bothering you?" And he said, "I'm hungry. My mom's an alcoholic. My dad left. My mom beats me. I'm hungry, and I'm worried about my sisters." Now, this was a kid that was a straight A student that was doing well, and I made sure he had lunch, and 2 years later, in another school district I had moved on, I received this note from a kid who says, "You probably don't remember me, but you left your footprints on my heart."
And he went on to study medicine.
And he went on to study medicine. He was going on to med school.
Rodney and Lucy and Carmen and Swati, we're talking about global food for kids at school. We will pick up in part 2 with you next week. Malika.
First, a video comment from an actual high school student in California. Here's what she had to say.
My name is Nautica Williams, and I'm a senior from Oakland High. And I would say school lunch overall through my high school experience has been pretty bad. At this point, students don't want to eat breakfast, they don't want to eat lunch, and so they leave campus and they buy foods like chips and soda. because basically lunch is either very moldy, or it's not tasty, or it's just gross, it's undercooked, it's overcooked, or it's just not appetizing for students. And so throughout the day, we either go hungry or we have to leave and spend our money, and that's not really productive.
In part 2, we'll discuss how to make school meals more nutritious.